Rise, everyone. Rise and grind, rise and shine, rise and shine. Ikaro family. This is Chief Yuya again with the From the Shrine segment. And this one is actually a pre record because those of you who follow my the Chief Yuya channel, you'll know that last night, I'll just say it because you won't. When by the time this comes, it would have been some time because I'm going to schedule this for I think the 9th or the 8th of February. But last night, one of my dear elders transitioned, and right after the transitioning, well, maybe a few hours after the transitioning, I ended up doing a live video and just spoke on a few things, and very timely because I had scheduled to talk about eldership. Well, I did a pre-record, talking about eldership that day and the value and the purpose of elders. And then that night, my elder transitions. All right. So even though it was only going to be one pre-record, which was that day, I felt, let me do another one, because the timing was just so interesting. But I wanted to speak about something for a moment. I wanted to speak about death, and not necessarily get into the whole procedure and process. A lot of times I'm asked that when someone dies, what do we do? Right? From a Yoruba perspective, an Orisha perspective, an Ifa perspective. But I want to speak about first, before that idea, just the philosophy of death and living, how those two are related to one another. First thing I want to share with you all is that when it comes to being born, which is a form of death, because when you're born into this existence, you had to die out of your last one. And whether that existence was you in the womb, or whether that existence was you in a different dimension or a different realm even, you had to go from there to here. So life does not begin when you emerge in this form. This is just another form of life. And just like when you go to sleep at night, your life doesn't end and then restart again in the dawning. It just changes because your direction, your posture changes. You may be horizontal now. The way you are processing information changes. And the tools that you're using to navigate change because you're not using your body now. So even sleeping itself, which is a form of death, is not necessarily the end of life, but a redistribution of that life vibration. So to, speak about death is very important to speak about the value and the idea of life that we maintain. And I want to tell you something. In old philosophy, old Yoruba, old West African philosophy, dying and being born are very, very long processes. It's not like the labor. Some women have 18-hour labor, 30-hour labor, 5-hour labor. That's not being born. And this philosophy, being born is a very long process. And it's an accumulation of all of your initiatory rites, you going through the rite of passage of puberty, you going through the rite of passage of a marriage, you going through the rite of passage of procreation, and you're not actually officially born until you have a child with whom you've made it with. That represents being born. So, it's not when you're an infant and you come out of your mother's womb, and that whole process, that's not actually being born. And our thought calculation and what it is that we're striving to live for, the being born is completing that process, right? So how does the living factor into that? Well, living is always a reality for an individual as long as they are remembered, right? So what happens is, through the process of, let's say, once the person transitions from this particular form, they've been born now, they've gone through their rites, they've gone through puberty, they've they've gotten married, which is an important part of living in our culture, because living extends to society. I'm sorry, marriage extends to society. So not being married or choosing to live alone is almost like going against the society. It's like going against the community in a sense, So then now having a child after that now completes your cycle, because the idea here is that not only have I joined in the community, because I would have taken my mate from the community, or my mate would have been brought into the community. So it's the idea of entwining myself with the community. But then there's a third party, which is your ancestral energies, which are present in the community. So it's me, my mate, my ancestors. We get together and we produce this being who's a culmination of all of us, and that completes me being born. Now, my living extends itself after I give up my shell. Then what happens is that people pour libations to me. People call my name. So the name is very important, and it's very important that people know your name. And when I say people, I'm speaking about your family. So it will be your children and your grandchildren, and really your peers, right? And you remain alive. You are still living life. It is considered, as long as you are remembered personally. So it may be, to give an example, right? Let's say you are the eldest of 4 children, right? And you transition and you have younger siblings under you. And then as time goes by, that youngest sibling may be the oldest matriarch or the oldest patriarch of the family for where it is at that time. As their personal connection with you commissions them now to be the one that calls your name when libations are being poured, whether it's OT, strong drink, or ginny, or rummy, or beer, or milk, or water, whatever it is. They are commissioned to do that because they knew you. They had a personal relationship with you, right? So then what happens is, when they transition and your name is called, but only in for the purpose of revealing genealogy, right? You become what's called the living dead, in a sense, right? You're not necessarily forgotten, but you're not active at that point. That's when you're considered dead. Not dead in the sense where, like, okay, it's all done, we don't even know who you are. But you're no longer an active force inside of the vestiges of the community, right? But that honestly may be 3, 4, 5 generations down the line. And then there's a whole new set of ancestors that come in. But it's a continuum of the same source genetic material, if you will, in a sense, or the same lineage. It's a continuation and a working out of certain things, right? Or certain issues, or certain imbalances, so forth and so on. So one of the greatest tragedies that could befall a person is that their name is forgotten, and their name is forgotten very quickly. Like, so let's say if you're a person who you're a lone wolf. You have that lone wolf renegade mentality. You have no mate, you have no children, you have no connection, or you don't really have any close family. When you transition, individuals may not know your name. Individuals may not say your name because they don't have that kind of connection with you. No one really knew you. So in that sense, you would go into the forgotten pool. And the worst thing is to be forgotten, because what it does is it severs your line to immortality. You live forever through the memories and through the words and even through the genealogical timeline of your people. And if you're not a part of that genealogical timeline, then you're like a forgotten spirit, you see. And that's like one of the scariest things, or the worst things that could happen to you in our culture. One of them, not the, but one of them, right? So the idea of living and dying and being born, when your elders transition, or anyone, right? It could be an abiku. It could be a young child that you have to transition. Someone maybe 20, 21, 10, 5, 30. It doesn't matter. As long as you're saying their name and then there's someone to carry on that name after you, they are still living their life. Their timeline is still going. You see? And in the same instance, if they have not gotten married, if they have not had children, procreated, whatnot, then technically they were never born. So you may find that they become a tunde, where they return. Yeye Tunde, Baba Tunde. The mother has returned, the father has returned. They return so that they can now fully go through the process of being born. You see, so when we compare, that mindset to what a lot of times we take on in the West, where it's like, well, marriage isn't for everybody, children ain't for everybody. These experiences are not for everybody because of the sickness that we've taken on. It's not because we're born to be alone, to live alone, or we're born not to procreate. It's because of what we've taken on and the ideologies that we've taken on and we've claimed and held as being sensible, regardless of nonsensical they actually are, right? So again, when an elder transitions, it is just that. It's a transition. That's it. So now the work is on us. And a lot of times what we do is we put more work on them. Oh, you transition, you're in the ancestral realm now? Well, I know you're going to do some things for me. I know you're going to hook me up. Here, let me light a candle to you so you can do this for me. You can do that for me. Let me pray to you and ask you for this guidance and ask you for advice. But it's the same thing when someone initiates. If you initiate into a certain spiritual tradition, then it is the community's responsibility to support you through who it is and what you are now. If you are installed as a chief, yes, you're a servant to the people, but it's not just you're just a servant. The people are supposed to support you in that role, you see. But a lot of times in our Western mentality, we're very selfish, very self-absorbed, very inconsiderate, very, very inconsiderate, very, very selfish. Right, I can't stress that enough. If you haven't heard it, if you haven't really understood what I'm saying, they're very, very selfish. So someone will receive a position or a title. It's just like when your friend gets a job somewhere. Like when you were a teenager and your friend got a job at a food spot, and you're like, oh, I know you're gonna hook us up. You're not even considering that they may lose their job. They're there to earn money. They didn't take the job to hook you up. They took the job in order to fuel what it is that they're trying to do and to support what it is that they're trying to do. It's the same thing when someone graduates to the ancestral space. They're still on a journey. They have to still continue to be pushed. And if their name is not called in a way where they're being fed and pushed, then they start to become a part of the forgotten. You see, so then they end up having to be pulled back and let's try it again. Let me now try to live a life with a character where my name will be remembered. Let me now come back and create family and create children so I can fully be born, so I can fully be acknowledged. Because without that, who would acknowledge me? It's not just about me being an old woman or old man and having children who will wipe my behind and get me dressed and feed me. It's about what happens after I leave this shell, after, I get off the bus, if you will, and I go on to the next road and go to the, as my elder said earlier today, get a connection, my connecting flight. I'm on this flight, now I got to catch another connecting flight, right? But the key is, did they remember you on that last flight? Do they say your name on that last flight? Or did they punish you because of something that you did so heinous that they don't even allow your name to be spoken anymore? That they will not name any children after you, and they allow you just to go into the pool of the unremembered, which is again one of the most horrible things that could happen. So again, like I said, I thought it was very interesting and appropriate that I spoke on elders. And yesterday dawning, and then my elder transitions at 100 years old. He was 100. He would have been 101 this year, November. That he transitioned right when I did the segment. But there's always synchronicity, and everything is always happening in divine timing. All right, so I just wanted to leave that with you all today. Think about the necessity of allowing yourself to fully be born and going through the long process of being born. And just like our elders said, being born is a long process. Dying is a long process. It's long. It's not that when they close their eyes and no, because it's generations and generations who are calling your name and saying your name that keep you alive, and that's all a part of I should say the death of sin, as they're doing that, and that could be 200-300 years of death. And just like being born could be 40 years, 50 years, 30 years of being born, not to mention the non-physical or the time in the womb, you see. So yeah, just give that some thought on this day. All right, this has been Chief Yuya from the Shrine. For the other podcasts, again, you can always go to theorisha.com. All right, until such time, I'll speak to you tomorrow. Travel safe. Make sure you don't stress yourself out too much today, and think about what has been said to you, and support those who have been put into community positions. They're not here to serve you in the way that you think, because you haven't earned the right to tell them how they should serve you. All right? They're here to be supported while they assist you in your journey. There's got to be some reciprocity. It's the breathing in, the breathing out, and that's the balance of a community. All right. See you tomorrow. Odavo.